Claude Chabrol began his career over 40 years ago as one of the young Turks of the French New Wave. Co-author of a key book about Alfred Hitchcock, he showed an early taste for the deadly ironies and violence of middle-class life so beloved by the master. Now, over 50 films later, Chabrol demonstrates again that no one dissects the cadaver of the French bourgeoisie better than he. Actor Thomas Chabrol, son of the director, guides Canape into the morgue.
The main plot of The Flower of Evil is really weird, you know. It takes place in Bordeaux. It's in the countryside of France, where we make such good wines, and we are in a family of the husband is a pharmacist, some kind of pharmacist, and his wife Anne Charpin-Vasseur, played by Nathalie Baye, she's trying to do something of her life, so she decided to run for mayor.
Entrez, entrez. Oh, Thérèse, boucle-moi cet avorton. Asseyez-vous, je vous en prie.
Alors, monsieur Labière, vous l'avez eu, votre appartement du 3e?
Encore heureux que je l'ai eu. Je suis assez attendu, hein.
Oui, vous êtes content maintenant.
Ça, c'est mieux qu'au rez-de-chaussée, hein. Vous avez tous ces petits gamins qui viennent faire des saletés sur le carreau. Mais ça serait encore mieux si la chaudière se mettait pas en route toutes les 3 minutes.
Ah oui, je sais, ça fait partie de mon programme de l'année prochaine, faire revoir les chaudières.
Non, mais c'est surtout à cause de ces petits salauds qui ne cherchent qu'à faire le mal.
Oh, mais tout de même, le quartier s'est bien amélioré.
Ah, c'est sûr que c'est mieux. N'empêche qu'il manque toujours un banc. Et quand on va pour se promener et qu'on a un peu de mou dans les jambes, on n'a plus qu'à s'asseoir sur son pouce, si vous voyez ce que je veux dire.
Mathieu, soyez gentil, notez qu'il manque un banc, s'il vous plaît. C'est insensé qu'ils aient pas prévu de banc. Je vous ai pas présenté Monsieur Mathieu Lartigue, qui est mon bras droit et le second sur ma liste. C'est un remarquable juriste et très efficace.
Vous avez bien noté pour le banc?
Oui, j'ai mis la chaudière en priorité.
Vous n'oubliez pas que c'est les élections dimanche. Il va falloir venir voter pour moi, hein? Et pour Monsieur Lartigue.
The feature film starts by not a flashback, but starts in 1944. We just come in the house, in the family house near Bordeaux, and you have a young girl just prostrated, you know, in her room, and we go to another room where we see her father. We know later that it's her father, dead, with blood, with a lot of things. And we understand that she killed him. She was judged unguilty, but she knows she's guilty about that. And she had to deal with that for about 50 years. The story is nowadays, in the year 2002, and it gives the opportunity for Aunt Lynn to pay her guilt to other people, to society, and I won't tell what's going to happen.
Je suis désolée, Tante Lynn.
Je crois que je sais ce dont il s'agit, ma chérie. Ne te tracasse pas pour moi.
Pierre Charpin, le grand-père, a exercé un important poste administratif entre 1940 et 1944. Ce qui n'a pas été du coup de son fils, qui a rompu avec sa famille et s'est fait tuer comme maquisard quelques jours après le débarquement en Normandie. C'est ce qui arrive quand on met pas tous ses œufs dans le même panier. Une sacrée omelette. Pierre Charpin a été assassiné peu après dans des conditions tellement étranges qu'on a même soupçonné une de ses filles, Micheline.
Mais comment peut-on être aussi injuste? Tu as un non-lieu, Tante Lynn.
Ça n'a pas d'importance, ma chérie.
Le non-lieu n'a convaincu personne. Pas plus que l'explication officielle d'une vengeance politique. La femme de Pierre Charpin est morte. De chagrin, point d'interrogation, quelques semaines plus tard. Mauvaise année pour les Charpin. Et bien des coups du sort en 50 ans. Ces gens-là n'ont pas de veine. Espérons que dans 15 jours, au moment du vote, Madame Anne Charpin-Vasseur, la Jeanne d'Arc à la cuisse légère, perpétuera la tradition et sera royalement balayée.
This kind of bourgeoisie, they're really they're away from all the, as we can, we call that now the France d'en bas, the lower France. They stay in their own country. They don't want to share vineyards. They don't want to, so they have to wed each other with their cousins and just to keep the wealth. And it happens that the main mansion we see in the movie and this little house by the Arcachon close on the Atlantic shore is owned by the same family. So it's a real cement, you know. It's it brings a lot of things in this movie. It was some kind of a fact.
Bûcher? Je suis pas sûr. Hein. Je crois que j'ai pris mes désirs pour des réalités.
Trop tard.
If it's Victorian, it's bad. If it's modern, it's good. That mantra destroyed many architectural marvels. We can be thankful that the world has changed its opinion. No one knows that better than the New York-based French architect Françoise Bollard. She recently received an Award of Merit from the AIA for her stunning restoration of the New York State Assembly chamber in Albany. Madame Bollard gives Canape a guided tour of the project, complete with glimpses of before, during, and gloriously after.
Well, we're standing here in the middle of the Assembly Chamber in Albany, and this is the building. The New York State Capitol is a late 19th century building, 1880s, and it consists of very large ceremonial public spaces, and the Assembly Chamber is one of the major ones. That's where the Assembly meets. And this space, which was created in the 80s, had over the years suffered many, many injurious modifications, some of them cosmetic, many of them actually structural, and it was time to really take it in hand. And the speaker, Sheldon Silver, felt that this space, which was not handicap accessible, had to be made handicap accessible so that all the citizens could attend to the assembly proceedings, and also felt that it was time for the chamber to look like a place where the people would be proud to come. This is a particularly interesting building for me as a French native. I was born in Paris and went through architecture school in Paris as well. It's particularly interesting to work in such a building because what you have in the architecture of this room and of the building is essentially Gothic revival and Romanesque revival. You have an architecture of load-bearing masonry, which is essentially the heritage in which I was born, and is the French and Italian and sort of Latin heritage of the Mediterranean basin. This is the 19th century, so there's a substantial, there's an interest in travel, there's an interest in Oriental things, and so threaded into this Gothic / Romanesque architecture are Moorish lines. You'll see in the wall decorations here, in the cut in the stone, you'll see some little Moorish inflections in the lines. You see the thread of time, but you also see the moment in the 19th century where people say, you know, what is Gothic architecture about and what is Romanesque architecture about, and trying to reinterpret it. To me, the most interesting aspect has been, to work in a great building, but also to be presented with a number of different problems, starting with bringing in the question of handicap accessibility to a historic building. A historic building depends on steps. You know, you come up a few steps in the building, then you go up a few steps in the lobby. So this sort of sequencing of how you enter a major public building always has to do with ascending to what, you know, increasing levels of power, so to speak. And we don't have that anymore. So the question is, how do you ceremonialize handicap accessibility, which is what we've done in the new east vestibule to the east lobby to the assembly chamber, which is essentially a modern solution in historic drag, so to speak, because what we have is a core around which develops a handicap accessible ramp, and the core itself is accessible through steps. So that's an important paradigm. At the other end of the spectrum, we did an office which is a new program, and therefore we executed in a very, very obviously modern way. Very clear glass, very clean, details, and so that the continuity of the vaults, which was important in that space, is respected. Also important, recovering the spaces has included removing countless numbers of drop ceilings, removing the walls that was walling off the arch, that was walling off the historic viewing galleries where the public is viewing the assembly proceedings. So that's an important part of the democratic process, And of course, last but not least, the assembly parlor, which is one of the great idlet spaces in the building, which we have restored to its original, splendor. And this chamber itself in which we're standing now, where an incredible number of really horrible intervention had happened. There was cork on the walls, there was milky glass on these windows, so you were in the middle of Albany, but you were in a tomb. The radiators came up to the middle of the windows, there was no light. So all of that, it consists of a number of small touches, a number of very large touches, and a careful design of solutions that are really fitting the problem.
In a world of luxury products, elegant restaurants, credit cards, and profitable multinational corporations, who wouldn't be happy? Many people, in many ways, is the answer. The controversial French film In My Skin explores one woman's irrational response to her unhappiness, compulsive self-mutilation. Actress, writer, and director Marina Devant talks to Canape about the challenges of filming what most people don't want to think about, much less see.
It's the story of a woman who is normal, with ambitious that we all have, professional ambitious and loving ambitious. She has a boyfriend, etc. And one day she wounded herself without knowing it, because she fell in a garden and didn't notice that she's hurt. And when she became aware of it, she's a bit troubled, and then she began to look at her body like an unknown object and to explore it. Usually we think our body is our identity. I think I am my body. But there are some incidents in somebody's life that are sufficient to suggest that maybe the identification with our body is not so perfect that it seems. So the experience that can be experienced by everybody of feel hurt, pain of a wounded is the detail that initiates in my character this type of question.
Je suis enfermée dans mon bureau depuis ce matin, je suis pas descendue manger. Mon bureau. Après, j'ai été m'entailler dans le débarras près des archives. Ce débarras a encore mon bureau. Avec leur climatisation, on va pas ouvrir une fenêtre, j'étouffe. t'es blessé, t'as une armoire à pharmacie près de la photocopieuse. Ah. Je savais pas, je vais y aller. Mais attends, comment tu t'es entaillé? Avec un truc en fer. J'ai compris, mais qu'est-ce que tu faisais avec ce truc en fer? Je m'entaillais. C'était superficiel, hein, c'est sans danger et j'avais déjà une blessure, mais... Non, enfin bref, on en parlera une autre fois. Mais pourquoi t'as fait ça? Je sais pas.
I'm doing films to be seen. I'm doing films for public be able to see it. So my purpose cannot be to shock or to make people feel bad or make people wanting to get out the cinema. So my work is precisely to think how can I show something which is difficult, which is violent, so that a large public can understand it and be touched. So my desire is create emotion, not emotion because I have made something violent, which aggress, which provocates, but because there is an emotion that the public can recognize.
Qu'est-ce qui vous attirait au Japon?
En fait, j'avais fait une maîtrise d'histoire sur le Japon ancien et une école de commerce. Donc j'avais fait du japonais et j'étais fascinée par le pays, enfin pas vraiment pour ce qu'il est, mais plutôt pour ce qu'il a été. Ah, c'était un peu comme un rêve. Vivre au Japon m'a permis de voir de visu ce que j'avais étudié à la fac, enfin ce qu'il en reste. Et puis quand on a étudié une langue, on a envie de la pratiquer. Le fait de parler japonais devait déjà être une motivation.
C'est sûr. Moi aussi, j'aimerais bien partir à l'étranger dans quelques années. Le groupe a des filiales dans beaucoup de pays d'Europe. Parfois, on peut s'installer ailleurs.
Vous iriez où?
J'aimerais bien Lisbonne.
Ah bon? Pourquoi?
J'y vais en vacances depuis plusieurs années, je me sens bien. La qualité de vie est vraiment supérieure aux autres pays d'Europe. En plus, j'ai des amis, la mentalité des gens me plaît. C'est pas loin de Paris, moins de 3 heures d'avion.
C'est vrai que c'est vite fait.
Je crois que c'est un bon compromis, à la fois des paysans tout en étant d'une culture occidentale. Je ne sais pas si je pourrais vivre dans une culture où je n'ai aucune attache. En tout cas, Lisbonne, ça me plaît.
Pardon.
Ah non, c'est moi, allez-y.
Mais je vous en prie, madame, prenez votre temps.
The Madeleine. You might call it the cookie that changed the world. Its taste is the trigger for the intricate chain of memory that makes up Marcel Proust's mammoth novel À la recherche du temps perdu, a masterpiece sometimes known as Remembrance of Things Past. For over 75 years, one translation has guarded the door for English language readers. But a new translation project is changing that. Writer and critic Lydia Davis, who's receiving rave reviews for her translation of the first volume, Swan's Way, speaks to Canape about the adventure of baking a new literary Madeleine.
Marcel Proust, who was he? That's a very complex question, but the short answer would be one of the greatest novelists of the 20th century, if not the greatest. Born in 1871, died 1922. Started out writing minor works, articles and pastiches, and was regarded as a sort of fop, you know, a dilettante by his contemporaries. Very clever and amusing, but would never really amount to much. And when he wrote the first volume, Swan's Way, of his masterwork In Search of Lost Time, which used to be called Remembrance of Things Past, it was rejected by publisher after publisher. They could not really recognize the value of this. It had no plot. Didn't know what to make of it. It tells the story of Marcel, although he isn't really called Marcel more than 3 times in the entire novel, but this is the narrator, who's modeled closely on Proust himself, and it tells the story of his childhood, and then the story of one of his father's friends, Swann, Swann's unhappy love affair with Odette. And then we go back to Marcel as a child. The first English translator began work on it as soon as the volume was out because he saw the value and the fascination of that book, Moncrief. And the volumes followed one another right after that, the English volumes, one after another as soon as they came out in France. The difference between my translation and the previous one, the classic, which most people know Proust through, which is Scott Moncrief's translation. He was a beautiful writer, but he was a little wary of certain explicit words, like even Odette's body becomes, in the Scott Moncrief translation, Odette's personal charm. Even though he follows the contours of Proust's sentences, he pads, he adds words, he dresses it up a bit. He even adds ideas and metaphors and so on. Instead of the entrance to the underworld, he'll say the jaws of hell, that sort of thing. My translation is seen as being a lot cleaner in a way. One review compared it to an old master painting that had been cleaned. And the colors are brighter and even shockingly bright if you're used to the other sort of time patinaed colors. So it's cleaner and plainer and fresher. Proust was actually a lot plainer than Moncrief, his translator. Proust himself considered himself a very concise writer, and that when he revised his work, he revised it, he not only added to it, but he also revised it to become even more concise. And I find that you can be very concise in 3,000 pages, which is what à la recherche du temps perdu is. You can also be very concise in my last works, which were only one title and one sentence often. And I found it very enjoyable to be getting briefer and briefer myself as I got longer and longer in the Proust. But concision is concision. He doesn't waste a word, and I try not to myself.
$100, $200, $300. The number of channels on cable TV just keeps going up. But what if there were 10,000 channels? Who gets the remote control then? Who wants it? French multimedia artist Claude Kloski takes on the problem of media blitz in his clever installation simply called television. It's on view at Location 1 Gallery in New York, where curator Nathalie Anglaise and technical manager Drazen Pantic give Canape a peek at a media environment closer to today than we think.
Location 1 is a not-for-profit art center where we invite artists from all over the world to experiment and collaborate with traditional and new media. Claude Kloski is a young artist, but he's already very well known in France, and so we're very privileged to have him do this exhibition here. Claude works with new media. He also works with more traditional media, such as he's done a lot of drawings, but he culls his images from the fashion world, from the communication world, basically. We invited Claude Kloski to create new work here, and he has made this wonderful installation which is called Television. And television is basically, there's not one didactic way of looking at this installation, but as you can see there are 19 monitors, and for this piece Kloski developed 10,000 channels, and he's thinking about the way we live in a society where there's just so much information going on, and basically there's very little content that's actually being produced. He's also thinking about issues such as the way that the internet and television are interchangeable formats, the way that content is completely leveled out. When you look into a magazine, for example, you'll see an ad for Slim Fast, and on the other page you'll see an article about children who are dying of hunger. So content is just completely on the same level, despite the huge amount of information that we get and that we see. And this is what this installation is about. Now it's also accessible on the web. We have a website, www.location1.org, and you can actually view this installation on our website. A lot of these images he downloaded directly from the web. Others he created directly. And they're very short, basically, and they're very, in French there's a term which is ludique, which means very playful and very physically engaging as well. So when you walk into the gallery, you have the impression that you're walking into a TV shop with all of these monitors, one next to the other. Then you have all the cables hanging in the back. So this is a small geographic channel, as you would find on the television. Let's click here. Number 2. The number 2 here that I'm holding directs the 4 monitors here on the top. It's a very playful way of kind of being critical as well.
A GIF is a very common way of actually using graphical elements in a web, and since the early days of web and the first browsers, GIF was the format that emerged as a small, compact way of actually transferring graphic elements through the network. GIFs have that ability to make animations. So if you line up, like in a flip book, images one by one and compress in one GIF, one image, then you have this illusion of movement. And this is something that he wanted to use for each particular channel. Kloski was downloading GIFs and images from the internet using Google. All those GIFs as created are very small, and then he blown them full screen to maintain this look of like pixelization and some kind of fake television effect that you can see very often. It worked really well in this context, basically. It was totally, absolutely perfect for what he wanted to do. And it's immense work. He created, first of all, downloading 10,000 images and more, selecting and then actually composing into those animated images.